I built this Traders Outpost in ARK Survival Ascended using the brand new skins from the Tides of Fortune DLC and blending them together with the Frontier and Steampunk skins from the Bob Tall Tales DLC. So there's no mods needed at all to build this base, and this Trader Outpost is perfect to build along the coast so you can park your ship of water tames there and enjoy your marketplace and make sure that others can easily visit it and access it as well, so that you can trade with your friends or the community server at large, depending on where you are playing, of course. But the base itself also offers some really nice layers and textures and plenty of spaces to utilize during your survival playthrough, from a greenhouse off to the side, a nice watchtower, crafting rooms, your bounty board can easily be hung up as well. There's even some room for a Dino Pen so you can keep some of your tames safe or do some breeding safely on the inside of your base. Hello there, survivors, and welcome back to another build tutorial on my channel. And if you enjoy seeing build tutorials like this and you want to continue to see more, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out and I do appreciate all of the support. And of course, you can always consider becoming a YouTube member to help support the channel even more. Tier 3 members actually get access to some exclusive templates over on my Discord. And as always, of course, feel free to leave your suggestions for future builds you'd like to see down in the comments below. So we'll be starting with the foundations for the entire build. So this is kind of like the little street in front of the actual base itself, which is 14 foundations long and then 2 wide, which is a really nice little reference point before we get started with the actual foundations of all the buildings attached to each other. Now, we're going to start with the main building here first, and this is just the street right in front of the buildings. You might want to leave some room so that you can expand off to the side if you want to have like nice staircases connecting into the land, and of course that will depend on where exactly you are building. But for now, we're going to focus on the little street and the buildings itself. So from this corner, we want to add 10 foundations just like this and make sure that you can all place them down. And then this part, we're going to be making 6 wide in total, so just like that. And then we can take this all the way back into the front foundation of the building. We can also kind of reinforce it here at the front so that we can kind of see the shape, which is the biggest building. It's what I would use as the Dino Pen, etc. And it gives you a decent amount of space utilize inside of that shape. Then we'll start here from the back and we'll go in until we have 5 foundations that will still be left over. So yeah, we have 5 leftover foundations here, and then we can go across by just 3 of these. And this is actually kind of an in-between section of the build. We want to leave a gap of 2 before we have another one of these lines. This is the little in-between building. You'll see that we'll have a little bit more room here on the front utilize as our actual base. And then for the second main building, we actually want to go from here and make sure that we add 8 foundations in total, which means that there's 3 of them sticking out here around the back. Then we want to make sure that this is 3 wide before we bring back this building all the way to the front. And of course means that we can also connect it up at the front over there. So yeah, this is kind of the thinner building that will be to the side. And here at the end, we can add some of our triangle foundations just to give this a little bit more shape. We can also do that here on the side, which is where the greenhouse will be built. So we just want to add these. So if we're counting the triangles on the outside, there's 2, and there's 2 over there. Of course, in total, makes for 3 triangles. And then we can just fill that in straight away because, well, we know exactly what's going to be over there. And then finally, there's also going to be a tower here, which is a 2x2, which we can attach right there as part of the building. Then, of course, there's still quite a few little gaps that we want to fill up. Here, of course, we want to make sure that we fill this up. And again, you might want to expand this if you want to have a nice staircase out from the little street that we're building, but there's many different ways, of course, to design that, and it also depends on what else you want to build next to it. Then, of course, we can also start by filling in all of these foundations, all these shapes that we've made And we can do the same over here before we finish the giant building that we have here where we started. And that will give us the entire foundation for the entirety of this build. So this is the amount of space that we need. These are the foundations that we'll need for the entirety of the build. This includes the main building, the side building, and the connecting bit, as well as the little street in front of it. Then to get started, we're actually going to start quite easy with the greenhouse, just because it's the smallest building. So we'll have 2 high walls here, 2 high walls there, and the same on that corner, kind of giving shape to the basis of the greenhouse. Then we want to have our wooden beams going across the bottom. We can take out our pillars. We can make sure that we have one here on this corner. We want to have another one over there on that corner, so going up all the way, and of course connecting to the ground. If you really want to, you could add them in these corners, and then probably most specifically this one. I don't want to go up, just want to go down. You could add it there, but well, you're not really going to see it, so you might as well save on your structure count. Then we want to take out our triangle roofs, and we can go around the entire shape like this, building up all the way where the future main building is going to be. Then for the edge of the roof, we want to have a little overhang. Over this side, I would only add these 2, because these ones over here will otherwise intersect with the tower that we'll be building, which, I mean, doesn't look very nice on unofficial, and on official, you probably can't even get them to overlap anyway. So yeah, we just want to add that around the outside just to get that overhang in. Then we can use the Tides of Fortune structure set for a lovely roof texture all the way the top here, so that we can kind of hide the fact that we've used the greenhouse structures. Then these pillars and beams we want to turn into the frontier skins from the Bob Tall Tales DLC, which gets a really nice vibe. And then the windows, we can also use the glass frontier structures, because I think those look really, really good. And it's still the only official glass skin that we have so far. And then, of course, for completing the look, we can also transform the look of these foundations into the Tides of Fortune skin, so that we get that nice plaster textures on the outside too. And, well, that's how we built the little greenhouse addition to the base. Okay, we're going to start with adding the wall around this side, since we've started with the greenhouse. So right over here, we want to add 5 walls going all the way up to the top, and then we can actually make sure that we have a second one right over there. Then these top 2 we want to continue for 2 more before we can bring down this wall all the way back down again. And then right next to that, we want to expand it by 3 more walls that we can also bring up all the way to the top. There we go. And of course, here on the inside, we can be sure to add in or sloped walls. Then here all the way around the end, we want to make sure that we have our wooden pillar going all the way up to the top, and we can also change them to the frontier skin just to make it look a little bit nicer. And we want to do the same thing here over at the front, making sure we place down the pillar and of course change that to the frontier skin, so that we have the ends of the wall looking quite nice. Now, then we want to take out our Tides of Fortune skin, and we want to go around all of the wall, making sure that we skin this all the way through from one side to the other. Then we'll start with the bottom one. We want to actually flip the Z-axis for all of this. This flips basically the skin upside down, and this is what we're going to do for a bunch of these to create a nicer pattern. So first of all, the bottom one, the middle one, or the second one we want to leave alone. The third one, we can do the exact same thing. So again, we want to flip around the pattern. Of course, we don't need to do that for the slope walls. And then we can continue right over here. And then finally, we can do the same thing for the top layer. And as I said, there will be something very nice once we've done this for all of them. So we just want to continue that all the way to the other side. And now if we look from the outside, you'll see that these lines have kind of met up so that you have a section of 2 walls before there's another line, because otherwise you have a lot of these lines going across your wall, and now it looks a little bit more structural and intentional if we do it like this. So that's how we add this big wall going from one side to the other. We can then also take out our stone pillars and add them right in here, just up to where we have those sloped walls, and then we can take out the Tides of Fortune skin set and add in these lovely looking pillars. And if you want to, you can always play around with flipping these too, so that the patterns kind of meet in the middle, the nice patterns of those pillars. Then here on the other side, we can start with 3 walls that we also want to raise up to be 5 high, just as on the other side. Then we want to have 4 of these walls coming across, and then finally at the end, a full wall coming back down to the ground. Then we can add a pillar here at the very end, and of course another one at the end on this side, and continue it all the way to the ground. And we can change these to the frontier skin, as well as the one on the other side. And of course, it also means that we can change the skins of these stone walls to be the Tides of Fortune skin. And once again, starting at the bottom, we want to flip the Z-axis of these skins around so that those lines start to meet up. And we want to do that basically for every other one, so that you get those nice patterns of a cleaner wall, because you can see otherwise there's a lot of lines that would kind of interrupt your walls, which I personally do not really like. So I definitely prefer flipping these around. It is a little bit more of a time investment, of course, but in the end I think it's definitely well worth it. So yeah, I would take the effort of going around and changing those up. That gives us a basic kind of idea of the main structure that will be right here as this side building. Before we do anything else, we'll go all the way to the back here. We want to, of course, add some pillars. We want to make sure that these go too high, and we can actually also have some beams going across the bottom of this section. We want to have some wooden walls, or at least I'm going to use wooden walls. Technically, you can use anything because we're going to skin them anyway. And we want to change these to be some more windows so that we can enjoy the views from this hall ourselves. And of course, it also means that we can skin these pillars and beams to be the frontier skin, so they match up nicely. And then, of course, here on the top, we can add in a roof quite easily, just using some of our triangles. And then, of course, along the edge again, we can make sure to expand it a little bit so that we have that overhang here on the outside before we apply the Tides of Fortune skin to it to get those really nice textures. And then to fill in the rest of the wall, we want to have 2 of these walls coming down. Then we can have a wall going across from one side to the other and going back up on the other side. Here in the middle, we want to have our wooden walls. We can then have our pillars right next to it, and we can have our beams at the bottom as well as right over there. We can change those to the frontier skins just to make sure it looks a little bit nicer, and we can change, of course, the window to the frontier glass before we add in the Tides of Fortune skin to those stone walls. And of course, we want to make sure that we match the same patterns as the walls next to it. So again, we're going to flip those walls so that they line up, which also means that we want to do this one so that it lines up with the rest as well, which will clean up these walls at the back a little bit more. So this is a pretty good start here for this side of the building. And now the next step is actually making sure that we have the floor. So one in front of these pillars we want to start. And for now, we're just going to change the floors of this building that we've been working on, just to kind of signal to which part of this structure is all going to be part of this building. And then we want to add in some stairs here along the front. We want to leave a gap of 2 before we also have some stairs here on the inside, just so that we can have a very nice entrance here on these sides. Of course, we want to make sure that we add in some sloped walls. We can add in the railings And for some final bit of detail, we can add in our half pillars before we skin it all with the Tides of Fortune skin to get a really nice looking entrance here on the street. And of course, these we can also change. We want to take out our quarter ceilings. We want to have 2 over there, 2 over there on that side, and then we can have 2 ceilings right there in the middle before we have 3 right there at the front. And of course, we can change all of these also to the Tides of Fortune skins, so we won't notice anything anymore. Then we want to take out our stone gateway, snap it right there in the middle. Also add the actual gate itself, and of course we can change it to the Tides of Fortune skin because it will look amazing. And then we can take out all quarter walls. We want to make sure that we fill in the gaps here all the way to the top of the gate. Do the exact same thing here on the other side, and then finally fill in the top layer before we take out our Tides of Fortune skins and fill in all of this. Make sure that we change it to these nice textures. And then the top layer again, we want to make sure that we flip it around so that we have no lines crossing anywhere here on the front except the very top layer, which will really get us a very nice looking entrance over here. And before we finish this section with the roof, we're going to do a little bit of the infrastructure here on the inside, because of course we'll need staircases and everything. So to get started with, we want to have a staircase right over here, which is going to be a wooden one. And then we have 3 of our ceilings going straight. After that, we go in by 1 here and then all the way to the back before we make a 2 wide platform on this side over here. Then we can take out our normal stairs to make sure that we go up by 2 more. And on this layer, we can then be sure to add in another nice platform here. So we just want to kind of fill in this side so that we can easily move around from one layer to the other. And then over here at the top, we want to have this layer filled in and as well stick it out on the other side too. And then we actually want to take out this one here in the corner so that we can add our staircase in there. So this kind of rotates up and gives us access to this very top layer, which is perfect for like a little bedroom. We want to make sure that we add in these on the sides, and on this side we can make sure to go all the way from one end to the other. We will have to interrupt it here on the other side, but for now, just to get it in place and to make sure that they're all facing the same way, the easiest way to do this is just to make sure that you go all the way from the front to the back of the building. Then we want to come over here and be sure kind of exactly where this tower is going to be. So this is the 3rd wall that we have. We want to remove those 2 and these 2. So from the staircase, and then 4 of those quarter walls you want to remove completely. And of course, we want to make sure that we have a little bit of safety going on. So we want to have our railings here. We want to make sure that we have them here as well. Follow the staircase all along the side here. And there we go. And then of course, over here, we also want to make sure that we add in a pillar. That one is going all the way down. We want to also have a pillar over here, so we can kind of raise that up all the way to that corner. And then we want to actually have a pillar here. We can have a half pillar on top of it, half pillar over there, and then we can add them in more of these corners. Over here, actually, we want to also have a half pillar, and then underneath that, we can have 2 more pillars to kind of fill in that gap. And then here around only the bottom layer, basically, we want to make sure that we also have some of these beams in place, and then also have a half pillar there, of course, kind of just to finish this entire walkway. Then what we want to do, of course, is change all of these wooden structures to the frontier skin, just to make it all look a little bit nicer, because especially the ceilings I just prefer much more with these textures. But just to keep it all consistent, I think it's better to change them. Although you could definitely, especially if you do not own the frontier skin, leave them as normal wood, or look for a different cosmetic that you like the look of that kind of fits the sim vibe. And then of course here at the very top, we want to make sure that we skin all of these little water ceilings all the way around the outside of the building. There we go. And don't forget to skin the ones here underneath. They're harder to see, easier to miss. Now, if you want to make this accessible, the best way is to do some secret doors. You will need to remove this bottom pillar if you want to do that. Then we want to take out some secret doorways, add 2 of them here at the bottom. We can just skin them as normal, and then of course flip those skins around for this layer, and then you will be able to quite easily access this, because you can use this for where your generator is, or just some things that you'd rather keep a little bit to yourself. And then right above it, of course, we want to have another wall with this skin so that we can fill in that gap completely. And to make things look a little bit nicer, I could also add a pillar right over here and change that to the frontier skin. Then we can take out our scaffolding and make sure that we add them in those corners. And if you want to, of course, you can add them in many places, like for example over here and over there. But it also kind of depends on what you're building here, because if you want to build some like places for storage, maybe some extra layers, you might want to remove one of these scaffolding pieces. But they're definitely really nice to add in some details, of course, and just make it feel like everything is a little bit better supported on the inside here. If we then go to the other side here, we want to have our walls. We want to flip them around and just bring them up to the top like this. Then first of all, we want to bring this one down, flip it around like normal again. We can remove that one, place another one, and then continue this back to the other corner of the building. What do we want to do over here? We want to add the window here, so that's kind of the top of the window. And then these wooden pieces I would paint fully in the silver color, just to make them stand out a little bit more. So yeah, using the silver color, I'm using the ASR paint gun because it's just a bit faster. I don't need actual paint itself, but works the same way as a normal paint gun. But yeah, just want to paint them silver for a nice bit of contrast. And then finally here along this side, we want to make sure that we have these beams and then these half beams going into the structure so that we can finish this section of the build. So the back of the building is now looking complete. As for the front, well, it's kind of a similar design. So first of all, we want to have our scaffolding support pieces right over there to give a little bit more detail to it all. Then, of course, we can take out our beams too, and we can make sure that this goes all the way across from one side to another. And we can also skin that, of course. That gives us a little bit more of a basic layer to start working with. Then we want to flip these ones on the end around to get started. We then want to take out our quarter walls, have the normal ones there, flip for the second variant, add them on top, and then at the very top, flip this back around, have these pieces like so, and then have a normal wooden wall right there in the middle. And of course, we want to make sure that we add in some pillars too. We can change the pillars, of course, to the frontier skin, and then change those to the frontier windows before we paint these wooden bits again in the silver color to get a really nice contrast. And then it's pretty much time to finish this part of the building. So here at the front, or at the left side of the building, we want to start with these roofs. You can make them stick out by a full roof on the end. And then, of course, we can bring this all the way across, also make it stick out there. And we can do the same thing, bring this all the way back again. Then over on the other side, of course, we need to leave room for the future tower that we'll add. So first of all, we want to have these two over here. That's where the tower will be. So we'll leave a little gap and go around it. And then, of course, we can continue with adding our roofs all in the correct spots, just like this. And to kind of fill up the gaps in between the tower and the actual roof, we want to have 4 quarter roofs right over there, so that there's enough room for the tower to fit right in between that. Then, of course, we can take out the Tides of Fortune skin, and we can start skinning the entire roof into those nice tiles. And the same thing here over for the other side. and we want to do that all the way through. Now we want to count the roofs, and the easiest thing to do that is with an extra structure. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the fifth one here, we want to change the variant as well as the one right next to it. Then we want to leave a gap of 1 before we add that variant in again, and we want to do the same thing here over on the other side, just to basically add a little bit of character and details to the building. Then here on the other side, we want to repeat this one over here as well as that one. We don't want the other two just because it's going to be a little bit too close to the tower that we'll build next. Okay, then next up is the little tower that we add to the side here. So first up over here, we want to raise up these walls by 2 more, just to make sure that we have the right look. And that also means that we can raise or flip around the top layer right there. So that's the easy side of the tower. Of course, we'll have to build the rest too. First of all, we can actually take out some of our stone pillars, and we want to add a pillar right here on the corner and bring that all the way up to the very top. And we can also bring it down all the way here over at the other side, just to make sure that we have that all in place. And then over here, of course, we can also add it on the opposite corner, and the same right, oops, not over there, right over here, just to kind of line out what the tower is going to look like. We want to skin them with the Steampunk skin from the Bob Charles DLC, Tall Tales DLC, and then we want to change it to the second variant, which is the stone texture, which kind of fits very nicely with the Spanish Colonial set. So just to save myself some time, I'm going to use the variant cycle tool, which is a mod, but you can of course just do this, change to the stone variant. This just saves me some time during the tutorial. And yeah, we can do this all the way through, and then of course for all of these pillars. But yeah, these pillars will match these colonial builds very, very nicely. Then we want to take out those stone walls again. Here at the back, we want to raise up this layer by 3, and we want to do the same thing here on the other side. Then we can take out our colonial set or Ties of Fortune set and skin those, as well as of course the floor in the tower itself. We can start by flipping around the bottom layer of these walls to make those textures match with the main building, and we can do the same thing over here so that it all matches up with each other. There we go. So that's kind of the first layer in place. And here on the front, we want to take out our gateway and our gate and make sure that we can add those right here in place. And that's going to be the way to enter your tower. Okay, then for the next layer of the build, we want to add 4 of these water walls going up on all 3 of the remaining sides, just to give a little bit more detail and character to this tower, because otherwise it's going to look quite simple. Then we can take out those Cards of Fortune skins and make sure that we skin these water walls in the right look. Do that for all the different sides, and then we can have our walls, wooden walls, right there in the middle to kind of fill up those gaps. There we go. And then on top of that, we want to have 2 of our slope walls to kind of finish that shape. And finally, here at the top, we of course want to make sure that we add in another stone wall or 2. And then we want to take out our stone slope walls and finish the shape like this for our tower. And of course, we can take out the Ties of Fortune skin to do the top part, everything that is out of stone. We can flip around those textures on the top walls so that they will match with the rest of our building so far, and we won't have that line kind of interrupting things. There we go. Then we will take out our wooden pillars and we'll add them right here on the sides of the towers or the window, and then we can of course skin the window itself with the frontier skin. Make sure that we get some nice windows here inside of the tower, and then also of course skin those pillars to make sure that we get a nice look for the build. Then we want to take out some of these quarter ceilings and add them here along the sides. We want to then take out our wooden quarter stairs and add them underneath as some extra supports. We can also take out our ramps, and from the corner here, the pillar, we want to make sure that we have two of these ramps kind of going into the building. Then we can take out our scaffolding piece and make sure that we support it here from the side. We can change those to the frontier skin, as well as these little wooden bits to just add some extra details to the side of the tower. Then we can take out our wooden ceilings. We can add these three in, and then we can have this hatch frame here in the corner so that we can have a ladder. And then we can make sure that we have a ladder going all the way down. We want to skin the ladder with the Tides of Fortune skin, and we can actually skin the floor with the Frontier skin, thing that matches, but you still have the nice little details that you get with the Tides of Fortune pack. Then here in this corner, we also want to make sure that we add in that hatch frame. We can, of course, also add a ladder. I wouldn't go all the way through so that it's easier to get up and off the ladder itself. And we can skin this, of course, with the Tides of Fortune skin. Then we can take out our quarter ceiling, and we kind of want to surround this part. Oh, we don't want that one. Just around the outside so that we have a little bit of an overhang going on. Then we want to take out our normal ceilings and kind of finish this shape all the way. We can, of course, skin that all to the Frontier skin to make sure that it looks very, very nice. And then we want to take out our water stairs again and add them on the corner for some additional detail, which kind of looks like you've got some supports for the floor sticking out a little bit further, which of course we also want to change to those Frontier skins so that the wood all matches with each other. Then we can take out our half pillars and add them on the corner of this build before we take out our beams and go around the outer edge of all of it. There we go, just to reinforce it a little bit. We can take out our wooden railings too. Make sure that we add those around the outside so you don't fall down if you get up into this tower. Then we can have our thin stone beams or pillars on top of that. Then a half thin pillar on top of those, which we can skin with the Tides of Fortune skin, just to give a little bit more height. And then, of course, all these wooden bits below it, we want to skin with the Frontier skin so that we get those nice wooden textures again. And we can do that all the way around the platform here. And then finally, we want to make sure that we add a ladder layer of these water ceilings all the way around the outside here on top of those pillars that we've just created, just to give us a foundation for the eventual roof, of course, just to keep those textures consistent throughout the building. We can also be sure to skin all of these with the Frontier skin. There we go. Then we can take out those stone roofs. We want to add them right here in the middle of each of these sections. Oops, just like so. And then right next to it, it means we can have some of these water roofs just to fill in the entirety. And there is a reason why we're lining this up with the middle, which you will see as soon as we start skinning it. Then we want to have our corner pieces, of course, making sure that we get this roof going upwards. And then for the next layer, it can sometimes be kind of a struggle to get the snap point in the exact position that you want. So the easiest thing to do is to make sure that we just pick up the ceiling just temporarily. Then we can snap this corner in place, remove it again, and then just go all the way around the entire build. And at the very top, we want to start with a thin stone pillar, and then we want to have a thin wood pillar on top. The wood, of course, is going to be the Frontier skin, and this is going to be all of the Tides of Fortune skin. So we want to go around the building and make sure that we get that all skinned up so that we have this looking the way we want it to, all the way around us. And then we can change the variant of this middle roof so that we have that nice window poking out on all sides, which just really adds that little extra bit of character to the build. And you can see that this corner of the building is really already starting to look quite nice. I really like all of these layers that we've managed to create so far. And then there's some final details that I want to add here on the roof. We want to have these shallow sloped walls at the very end of the roof. Then we want to have our thin pillar also sticking up at the ends too. And then we can actually take out our railings and be sure to have these railings going across from one side to the other, just to add a little bit of character. And then we can also add in these thin half pillars just to add even more character. We will skin this all to the frontier skins, but this just adds that little bit of extra detail to the roofs, I think, to add a little bit of character and interest instead of just having a normal roof that we had. I think that this just adds that little bit more. Okay, and then next up is basically the connecting part from this side of the building to the big building on the other side, which is a rather simple addition. First of all, we can kind of continue this floor so that we, have the middle layer to work with. And then here at the back, we want to expand that with one ceiling sticking out over there. Here at the front, we can continue a little bit further and make sure that we have these ceilings going across the front like this. Then down below here, we want to make sure that we go in by one, and then we can just fill in this entire wall like so. Change it all to the Tides of Fortune skins, and then the top layer we want to flip around so that this basically turns into one nice wall without any interruptions on this side. And then we do want to add a few scaffolding pieces just to add a little bit more detail. Then here at the back, we also want to add these walls. So we want to just raise those up by 2 high. We can do the same thing and make sure that we, once again, flip these around so that we have no interruptions going on this side. And it also means, of course, we can skin the inside floor here to make sure that that is all the nice textures that we want and need. Up here, of course, it means that we can have all frontier skins on the floors to continue that. And here at the back, we can add one of these beams. We can skin that. And then we can add our railing. We can then take out our stairs. We can have one staircase here before we add in another ceiling, and then 2 more staircases to basically connect back into the landscape. We can, of course, change the skins on all these, and we can add our railings going down the side of this staircase to make sure that we don't fall down. So this is basically just an extra way in and out of the building. Here at the back, it's rather simple. We want to make sure that we have a doorway here. We want to have a double doorway right there in the middle, and making sure that these textures are flipped these way to the outside. So we want to have that here too, and we want to have 2 windows there at the front before we add another layer of our normal walls around the top like so on both sides. We want to have our pillars here in the middle. We can do the same thing here on the opposite side, and then we can also add in our beams. We can have a beam here at the front as well as over there on the side. We can have 2 beams going around there just to kind of fortify the build a little bit more. We then want to skin those pillars and the beams to the frontier skins to kind of match the look of the rest of the building. We, of course, also want to add in our windows here, and we can add in the door as well as adding the door there and the window right over here. Now, for these windows, I would use the frontier glass skin just to get some really nice glass windows, although the Tides of Fortune windows are pretty nice too. I will use the Tides of Fortune doors because I really like the textures on those. And for the walls, I definitely want to paint them again. And we can, of course, also take paint that double doorway. Might be a little bit difficult. You might want to remove a pillar if you can't manage to hit the right spot. But yeah, we want to paint those silver again, just as we did the top of that layer, just to set these apart a little bit more. Here around the front, we also want to make sure that we add in our railings. And of course, we can change those railings to the frontier skins to kind of make this nice balcony. Then we want to take out our thin pillar, and we want to have a half pillar on top of those. The top of the half pillar, we want to skin with the steampunk skin, and then the normal part, we just want to use the frontier skin to get those thin pillars to support a little bit of the roof. We want to then take out our wooden ramps. We want to start right over here, bring it up a little bit, just like so, which should not touch the other roof. And then here on the other side, of course, it means we can bring it all the way back down again, just like so. And then at the very end, we're gonna bond it a little bit more. Technically at the back here, it doesn't really do too much, but here at the front, it ensures that we have a little overhang that sticks out further than those little pillars that we had. And then I would personally also skin the top of the roof to the frontier skin, just because I think it looks a little bit nice. I think these textures fit a bit better with the build we've been working on, because we've had these frontier colors in quite a bit of the building. And if you want to, you can add these beams. I'm not sure if you can have that beam on official, but otherwise you can always go for the half beam instead. And that kind of gives us this nice connecting piece from one side to the building to the other. But with Tides of Fortune, we also got this beautiful market stall. Now we want to free place it, so don't snap it to the foundation, because then it will kind of snap through the wall. But we want to make sure that we see the back wooden planks coming out from the wall, and then we can kind of place it in here, which kind of fills up this space perfectly and also allows other people to come up to your market and actually use it. And then all we need to do is here on the inside also add these scaffolding pieces so that we have a nice connecting part from that building we already finished. And with that, we have the connecting part of a building done as well. And then it's time to get started on the biggest building, which will be the Dino Pen, and will offer you plenty of space for crafting and storage, whatever you prefer. We want to take out our gateways, turn on snapping again, and have two of them right over here, which means from this little bit that we built before, you have one stone wall coming out and then one going around the corner, basically. These walls we want to raise up by 4 in total to form the corner. We can do the exact same thing here on this side. So raise them up by 4 and go around the corner on the opposite side. You can also fill in the walls all the way across the top of the front. Then we want to go 2 before we bring down another one of these walls. We go 2 more, another one of these walls, and then 2 more before we reach the corner. Then this side is the same as the front, so we can go all the way across like this before we bring that back down. Then we go around the corner again, leave these 2 before we bring this back down into the build, and then we have a secondary wall just right over there. So this kind of shapes up this building a little bit. We want to then snap in our gateways in all of these gaps that we have left, except the ones, of course, going into the rest of the building. We'll figure out that connection in a little bit. Then we can take out our wooden walls, make sure we add them in the side gate frame, so nowhere else but the sides. And we can just kind of fill all of these in. Then we can add the gates itself to the gate frames at the front and at the back. And then we, of course, want to start skinning. First of all, these are going to be windows on the side of the building, of course. So we want to skin those to the frontier glass skin so that we get some nice big windows that will hopefully let in plenty of light. And then we can start skinning the walls with the Tides of Fortune skin, as well as the gate frames and the gates themselves, so that we get some nice entrances at the same time, as well as some nice window frames for where we already in the windows, and this will just help make sure that we have this big space ready for some of your games up to like medium sized creatures. And of course, I want to make sure that we have skinned all of the new additions that we've just placed. Then the second wall, we want to start flipping those textures around. We can of course do that all the way across the building, and this will be to prevent the pattern from being too repetitive on the outside. Of course, we've done this a few times now, so we're going to do that same thing here for this building. Unfortunately, there's not really a faster way to do this, but it will look much better in the end. So yeah, also for this layer, we want to make sure that we flip the top layer around. That will make the walls on the outside look a lot cleaner. So for now, we'll just go all the way around and flipping those top layers to the right way, so that we'll have some nice clean walls on the outside. A bit of a annoying little job, especially in survival. It's even more annoying, but again, it's definitely well worth it by the end of the building. Like, it will be a very nice looking build if you put in the time to actually change these skins around a little bit. There we go. Awesome. So yeah, that will just really help creating some more clean textures on the outside of the building. We want to also take out our stone pillars. We want to add them here on the corner all the way up to the top of the walls that we have created. So here at the front, as well as here at the back, of course. So we just want to make sure that we raise those pillars all the way up. We want to skin them with the Steampunk skin. And once again, we're going to make sure that we change those variants to the stone one, because that will just look a whole lot nicer. There we go. Just like that. And again, as before, you can just interact to change the variant, but I'm saving myself some time by using the variant cycle tool. And we'll do that, of course, for all of these pillars that we've just created, because I think this stone just blends in a whole lot nicer with the build and our build theme. And now that we've gotten started on this part of the building, I think it's also the perfect time to make sure that we skin the entire floor of this build so that it matches the look that we have everywhere else. There we go. All the way around the entire build like that. And then we want to add some details here around the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these ceilings right above all the windows, just so that we have a nice snap point. Then I also want to take out my shallow sloped walls, and I want to be sure to add them on the corners of all of those sections. There we go. And then I want to make sure that I can add my ramps on top of that. And basically that's going to give us a little bit more depth to the side of these walls, because otherwise they're kind of flat, and this way they're not. We also can add some scaffolding pieces underneath to really finalize that look and to make sure that they really look their best. Then we can take out our frontier skin, and we can be sure to skin all of those wood pieces to make sure that the textures match the rest of the build that we've made so far. I think this aesthetic really has a nice contrast if we use these darker wooden tones. And yeah, there we go. We have some nice details going all the way along the bottom of this part of the build. And then here on the inside, we can add a stone pillar right there in the middle. Then we can have a wood pillar right on top. We can also have these wooden pillars raise up around those corners. And we can have our wooden beams almost go all the way, except for the very last one, where we want to make sure that we expand this. We can then have the beams around the edges. We also want to use some scaffolding pieces here to kind of make sure that this is all nicely and neatly supported all the way around the build. And then we also want to take out our half pillars and add them in the right spots, just like so. We can have our wooden railing around these edges before we add in our stairs going up by 2, and of course continuing those railings, which we then can start to skin to the frontier skins to make sure that they blend in with the existing part of our build. So we want to make sure that all these wooden structures are skinned with the frontier skin, and the one here at the bottom we can use the Tides of Fortune skin to get that really nice pillar. And that means that this central part becomes quite important, because this is basically where you go up to both different buildings instead of wasting more space to build an additional staircase all the way up. Then here at the end, we want to start filling in this entire floor. Just go around the staircase like that. And then we can continue to fill in this entire layer so that we can work on the next floor of this building. And we can create even more space to utilize as your base in this Traders Outpost. Of course, once we've done that, we want to have our half pillars there. We can have some beams going around the edges, and of course we want to add in the railings so that we know it is all secure and you don't fall down. You're just trying to walk around here. Then of course these ceilings themselves, we can also start changing to the frontier skins, because that just looks a whole lot nicer in my opinion. Yeah, we want to do that all the way across, and then of course the final bits here in the middle. Then here on the front, we actually want to make sure that we stick out these ceilings by 2 more, just to get a little bit of an overhang, just like so. And of course that also means that we can skin these to look like the frontier skins. Then we can also take out those scaffolding pieces, and here on the corner we can add some supports. We can do the same thing on the opposite corner, of course, and right here in the middle, so that it ends up between the 2 gateways. So again, it looks a little bit more like you have some proper supports going on. And then we can also take out our beams to make sure to go around the entire outside of this layer. So we kind of just want to follow all the way along and add the beam all the way around the building. There we go. Of course, this also means that we can skin this all to be the frontier skin, because it just will look a whole lot nicer, of course, and fit with the aesthetic that we have established for the rest of the base so far. There we go. Then I want to take out my pillars and want to raise them up by 2, leave a gap of 1. Then I'll leave a gap of 2, leave a gap of 1, a gap of 2, a gap of 1, another gap of 2 before I finally leave a gap of 1 over here. And this kind of gives us a little bit of structure for the wall that's going to be on this side of the building. And on this side of the building is going to be fairly simple. We want to flip these walls around, and we can just kind of fill it in all the way from one end to the other, just like this, and nothing special going on. Oh, except for the ones here at the end, of course. That's not actually part of the wall, just until where the pillar stops. On the opposite side, we can at least use the same placing for the pillars. So again, a gap of 2, then a gap of 1, and we continue that all the way to here. So basically where we also have the stone pillar below. And then we can also change the look of these pillars all the way around. Then we want to start by filling in some of these walls. Leave that one open, continue over here, leave that one open too, and then fill in those gaps. These ones we can actually have the walls in the other way round. We want to use the window skins on those to create a few extra little windows. And we can take out our quarter ceilings to add underneath these. And then we want to take out our quarter stairs as some little supports just to make them look nicer. Take out the frontier skins, of course, so they match the aesthetic a little bit more. And then we want to paint these walls silver again so that they kind of match some of the walls that we've already established before, but now just on a larger scale. So yeah, we want to do that on both sides, and these, of course, we can do that for every single wall. You can, of course, paint them in different colors, or lighter or less light, or just keep them as wood, but I really like the silver look for these. Okay, on the front, we want to leave a gap of 2 before we have some pillars, and we can do the same thing right over there. So that's kind of the pillars we need on this side. Then on the opposite side, we want to leave a gap of 1 before we have the pillars. And of course, we also will in them to the frontier skins. Over here, we just kind of want to continue the walls. We can fill in the top in the middle, as well as continue on the other side. Then here, we want to start with the quarter walls, the other quarter walls, and of course, a nice double doorway so that you can get into the balcony. And of course, we want to add in the door itself. The door I would skin would be the Tides of Fortune one. And then of course, we can paint all of these walls to keep the look consistent all the way throughout. So we'll do that for the entire side here. Then on this side of the building, it's going to be slightly different. So first of all, we want to start with those corners. Then we want to take out all quarter walls, the bottom variants first, just like this, and then the top variants for those gaps. Although technically you won't really see it, but it's, I don't know, I always do that. Then we want to have another pillar right over there. We want to have some normal walls facing the normal way, and then some walls flipped around right there in the middle, and some more pillars right in there. We want to change those to the frontier skins, and we can change these to the frontier windows, and the rest of the walls that we flipped around, of course, we can paint so that they all match the same kind of look and color that we've used on this entire floor. And of course, as some additional details, you might want to add these quarter ceilings as well as the quarter stairs underneath, and then change them to the frontier skins so they match the aesthetic of the rest. And of course, they make sure that this wall isn't as flat as boring. Then here at the front, what we want to do is add in the staircase that will lead to the next floor. We can of course have the railings on the outside, and even the half pillars at the end. Then we can start by filling in the next floor. Now, if you want to have some of the bigger structures, let's say you want to have the industrial forge, you might want to leave like a gap so that you can place it and it can stand up throughout that, but I'll leave those little customizations to yourself, because everyone might want their base to be slightly different, especially when it comes to those kind of utilities. So for now, what we'll do is just kind of fill in the entire base like this. We do want to make sure that this sticks out by 1 here at the back before we continue just to fill it all in, so that we have another floor and the top floor for our base. Here at the front, we also want to make sure that we stick this one out by just 1, that we have a little bit of space to play around with. Then we want to have our railings there, as well as our little half pillars. We actually want to have the railings around both sides here. And of course, it also means we can change those all to the frontier skins so they match our aesthetic. And it also goes for all of these ceilings, of course. We want to make sure that we go around the entirety of the build and fill this all in. There we go. All the way from one side to the other. So we want to just go all the way through these ceilings. There we go. Just like that. We've got a whole ceiling ready, but we now still need to focus on adding the details down below. So what we want to do is we want to take out our beams. We want to go all the way the front here. We of course also want to make sure that they look like the frontier skins. And then we can take out our pillars and come back down into the main structure. We can also skin these. We want to have our normal walls here at the very end. Just like that on both sides. Then what we want to do is make sure that we have these quarter walls in the corners. Then we want to have our shallow slope walls right next to it and our normal slope walls underneath it to kind of create this custom shape. We want to also take out our roofs. We want to have those connected, of course, to those parts, and then our ramps for the next layer. And then finally take out our railings, add in the final pieces of supports, flipping those around the top. And then we can take out our frontier skin and make sure that we skin all of these pieces to kind of get that darker wood color going around everywhere. And there we go. That just gives us a nice shape for the top layer of the building. Then we can have the half pillars on the corners as well as over here, just to give a little bit more shape to the balcony itself. And of course, add a nice railing around the outside so that we have a lovely balcony to use. If you're building this on other maps, of course, you can park your flyers on Genesis. Well, that won't be possible, but at least you have a beautiful balcony to enjoy the views of your surroundings. And if you're building this along the watersheds of your little harbor, if you're parking your ships here. Okay, so on the other side of the building, we want to go ahead and start with this beam going across from one side to the other. Then we want to take out our pillar and still have that come down by 2 at the very end, which is kind of like the start of our build. We'll have our quarter walls over here as well as here on the inside, and we can do the same thing on the opposite end. Then we want to have our full wall underneath those on both sides, and then we can start with this shape. So our slope walls underneath, and then our shallow slope walls for that second part. We can then also add in our railings again on the underside and make sure to flip around those parts. Then we can have our ramps basically going in here, making sure that they're the normal way round. And then of course, finally adding in our roof here to complete that shape. And once we've done that, it also means that we can start skinning it all to the frontier skins to make sure that it gets the right look and textures. So we can go all the way across the front here to make sure that they all match up with each other. There we go. But that means that we also have that little bit of the curved detail for this side of our building. Okay, we want to start here with the roof. We're gonna add the first 3 layers in here for the back of the building. We can of course bring that all the way up, and we can do the same thing here so that they meet up in the middle, and we kind of get the basic frame for what our roof is going to look like. We can be sure to bring this bottom layer all the way across from one side to the other. And also on this side, we can be sure to make 3 layers raise up all the way to the top. And of course, again, coming back down on the other side so that it all should line up and we get a little bit of a shape or basic frame for the roof of our main building. We can do that on both sides. On this side, actually, we can have another layer going all the way across, as well as the top layer coming all the way across from one side to the other. And the top layer we can also do here. So again, we have a little bit more of the framework of the roof already in place. Now, here on the inside of the roof, so basically the one that's facing the rest of the building, after these three at the end, it means that we can make a nice corner just like this. And we can do the same thing here on the opposite side of our building. There we go. And that means that we can fill in the remainder just as normal. We can bring out our beams, go across the bottom section here just like so, and then add in our slope walls to fill in the walls. We want to use our frontier skins, of course, on those beams, and then the frontier glass structure right on those slope walls, so that we get some nice windows in here. Then we want to use our quarter roof around the edge to still have a little bit of an overhang going on here, but making it look a little bit nicer. Then we can have our shallow slope wall right on top of there. We can have our railing going across the top of this. And then finally our half railing going across the top of the building. Then we want to have our thin pillar coming up at the end here to make a little bit of extra detail. And then here some thin pillars or half thin pillars to add those details all the way through. And then we can actually take out our Tides of Fortune skin and start skinning this entire roof so that we get the whole look in place for this entire section of the roof. Make sure that it looks the right way. There we go, all the way across from one side to the other. And of course the frontier skin we can utilize to skin these wooden bits on top. Make sure that these details also look their very best. So we want to make sure that we skin all of them. Here on the back of the building, we want to start filling in this wall. So we'll start in with the full walls. Then we have some of our top walls in here. And of course, the final bit at the top. Then we can use our quarters to fill in a section. Also making sure to switch the variant so everything lines up. And then finally have the walls right there in the middle. We want to have our pillars going along the sides of this section. We can then skin a lot of this to the frontier skins to match that darker look that we've used in so many of these. And then we can have a nice window right there in the middle to kind of finish this section, which kind of gives you the entire back of the building looking complete. Then we go over to the front. Now you can very well just do the exact same thing as on the opposite side and create a window, but I want to make a cargo hole, which means that this is going to be an open section. So if you don't want that for whatever reason, you can just build the same thing as we did on the back. But here on the front, we want to add in these pillars just like so before we add in a beam going across from one side to the other and changing that all to the frontier skins. Then we can start filling in the rest of the structure, adding in our slope walls like this, and also changing this all to the frontier skin and adding a nice little window at the very top. And if you want to add some additional details, you can always have some scaffolding in here to make it look even nicer. Then on this side of the building, we want to have some beams. We want to have these ones right in the middle, so that's above the middle window, and expand them with one more on both ends. Then we can, of course, change them to the frontier skins. But before we do anything more, I want to make sure that we do the inside here. Now, you want to use a wall or a secret door if you want to maybe utilize the space behind it as some extra secret storage. But we want to just add some walls because it's a lot easier to work with and, you know, kind of put crafting stations against. And we can change all of this to those frontier skins. And if you really wanted to, you could, of course, add a little bit of additional details here on the inside by adding a few pillars in just to give it a little bit more structure rather than just being a very simple wall. Now, we want to do the same thing here on the opposite side so we can get this started. We want to bring this a little bit further and have it go in here. And we can continue this all the way through very much the same way. And of course, We can add a few of those pillars in as the same kind of supports as we did before. And then, of course, change them all to the frontier skins just to make the inside of this a little bit more practical to work with. Then, of course, we have this side to design. What we want to do is start with these sloped walls on the corner, then have the top part here before we add in the bottom part right there, and of course continue those sloped walls and adding a normal wooden wall right there in the middle. We want to have all pillars there. We can then change whatever needs to be changed to the normal skin and add the windows right there in the middle to make it look a little bit nicer. Then we want to change to our roof tiles here. We want to start adding them in like this, and then we can just kind of finish the entire shape of the roof over here. And of course, where needed, we'll add in these corner pieces to kind of blend it all together in a satisfying way. I would even add a corner piece right over there so that it really fully blends in to the rest of the roof. Then we want to add a little bit of detail here, of course. So we'll have the shallow sloped part. We'll have the thin pillar here at the end, but we can also have those at this end of the roof, of course. So we want to have those in there. Then making sure that we have the pillar at the very end sticking out, and this one actually needs to be the right way up, of course. It needs to actually stick out, and then we can add our railing across the top of the roof. And for this one, of course, it means that we have the railing going across from one side all the way to the other to really add some nice details to the roof here. And some additional details means that we can add the half in pillars in too, to really just add a little bit of extra details along the roof ridge. So we want to do that all the way. And of course, it means that we can skin all of these wooden textures to be frontier all the way along the roof, and we'll do that all the way to the very end. It's a little bit of work, but I do think that these details really help add a bunch of character to the build in general. So we want to just make sure that we do that all the way across the very top until the very end. And now that we've got all these in place, it also means that we can start skinning the rest of the roof with the Tides of Fortune skin. So we want to just go across from one side to the other and make sure that we skin everything along the way to get this beautiful texture on our roof that we've just made. So we want to just keep that going all the way across just like this. And of course, if you want to, you can add a few of these in as well, just to kind of give a little bit of additional detail to the roof, since we have those nice variants anyway. Then we want to add some additional details to this street in front. Every two, we want to have a stone half pillar just to add some additional details. And as I said, you can integrate this path further along your base depending on where you're building. Then we want to make sure that wherever you can still see this, we also have the pillars going down below just as some additional support. And of course, it also means that we can skin all of these to be the Tides of Fortune skins. Alternatively, these ones underneath, you could also change to these Steampunk skins because they might look a little bit nicer, but that's totally up to your personal preference. Personally, I think that these pillars look a lot better as like separate standing pillars rather than being attached to the foundation. But again, it is totally up to you. And then of course, we can also add in the railing. Now, if you're adding any docks in, you might want to leave some of these railings out and connect some docks yourself. But for now, for the tutorial, we'll just have a railing going all the way along the edge of the street here. I will show you where I added my docks if you want to replicate something similar. Now, if you might want to add the cargo haul, I think it's nice to actually make sure that you're hauling in some cargo. So we want to bring this out by 3 beams going out, and then we have 5 of these pillars coming down like this. So just like so, before we add in the ceilings all around it. And we want to make a 3x3 little platform that will be hauling the goods. So we want to at least skin these ceilings as well as these beams here at the top. But if you want to, of course, you can also skin this if you think that the thin one looks a little bit more like a rope. It doesn't really matter too much. What really matters is making sure you have a crossbow and a zip line as additional details. You want to shoot one there and then add it right here to the corner. And we're going to do that for all the sides of our building or of our platform, because then it actually looks like there's some cables that are basically holding this up, which I think is a really nice and a really cool addition. And it's always fun to utilize zip lines in a build design like this, and you can see that really looks like the cables are helping holding that platform up. And of course you can add some barrels and some storage on top of that platform to make it look like you're actually bringing cargo into the build. And with that being said, we basically have the entire base built like this. So it offers a huge amount of space in different rooms, a nice layout, and most importantly, just a really nice front with all of the different layers. You've got your marketplace accessible, and if you build this along the coast, you can easily add some docks so that you can also park your ships or water tames, and of course utilize the oceans here on Genesis or any other maps if you're building there in the future. So this is my full version, of course, that I built myself, and you can see I've got some docks. So basically what I've done here, I've added another 4x4 foundation so that I could add the staircase to the side. If you continue building because you want to add more buildings, like separate breeding buildings, whatever, you can of course keep this going. And I've done the same thing on the other side. You can see here I've actually still used the wooden pillars. It's kind of your personal preference, of course, what you prefer. I do think the stone ones are actually quite nice, and you know, they have some really nice details, so it's nice to kind of blend them together. What I've done though, I've broken up some of these 2x2s to get some of these quarter stairs in, just to lower it down a little bit, and then basically building some nice docks, kind of dividing them into 2x2 sections each time with these half pillars and then pillars down below. You can of course even add scaffolding to underneath if you want to have even more details. Kind of depends on how far you want to go and how many structures you're willing to spend, but it's definitely nice to add a little bit of extra foreground like this to the build itself. And of course it makes it a little bit easier to park your water tames or your ships right next to it. And of course if you want to have the shipyard, you probably want to expand a little bit deeper into the ocean because, well, they are quite big. Anyway, so this is what the full finished version could look like with a bunch of decorations. As you see, I really add like a lot of these barrels around because I think that's the perfect kind of decoration here, as well as the beer barrels and of course the fishing baskets, because they really fit the right vibe. And then you want to have a bunch of storage things on this platform so it really looks like you're hauling in cargo to make that cargo haul work. And then of course we have the beautiful little marketplace. I added some extra cargo alongside that too, and we even have our trader in there at the same time. We have a bunch of parrots chilling around the place to adding some more life too. And then the tower itself, I mean, there's some room for storage, of course. You can make a bedroom up here if you want to. It kind of depends what you're going to use every room for, of course, but it's a nice access point with some good views of your surroundings. And if you're building this on a map where you have flyers, you can of course easily park some flyers up in the tower or on top of the balcony, or even fly them into the attic here. So then if we take a full closer look at this build, there's a full tour with a little bit slowed down pace already up on my channel, which you can watch, but a quick tour is We have some storage here. We have a nice greenhouse, of course, here to grow some plants. I built this storage rack. Just kind of have some ceilings where you can place down some extra vaults. We have some more storage here. The bounty board. Some space inside for your creatures. My creatures are using the Drowned Souls cosmetic as saddles for some of these creatures. They're quite nice. But yeah, this is where you could hold your creature saves or do a little bit of breeding. Of course, we also have the staircase up here. We have a nice sitting area here. We have a kitchen over there. Then we have a cozy fireplace and a bedroom up on this side of the building. And on the other side, we also have the staircase up to a more practical crafting space with a lot of the utilities. I left some room in here to have an opening for the industrial forge. And then we have some more crafting here all along the top. But you can see there's a lot of space here. So there's a lot of room for you to kind of customize and adjust to your own personal preferences. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed this build tutorial. And if you did and you would like to see more of these types of videos, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and of course, feel free to leave your suggestions of future builds you'd really like to see me do down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video or the next stream. For now, goodbye.